on purpose. My money is so old, there's none left. In that sense, Syracuse and I deserved each other. The place used to churn out everything from rifles to soda ash, helicopters to typewriters. But by the time I showed up, they'd paved over the Erie Canal and gutted the great mills. There were still traces of those glory days if you knew where to look. Things like our radiator covers, made of the steel sheets from which Remington and Smith Corona letter key stems had been punched, leaving behind a delicate herringbone tracery. The ghosts of history are in the details, in the negative space. I scrunched my pillow against the sofa arm and started reading a garage sale paperback of In Cold Blood. 4 pages on, I heard this long, dull whoomp from outside, noise so deep it echoed in my ribs. There was a pillar of smoke framed all majestic in the porch doorway. It twisted black against the city-pink night sky, billows delineated by hundreds of thousands of red-gold sparks, pinpoint gems helixing up to join the stars. Exactly 3 a.m., if you believe the clock in the stove. Soon there were fire trucks in the distance, their Doppler effect wails punctuated with staccato chatter and yelp as they barreled through each intersection. When the engines rolled into the next street, they cut the sirens but kept all the lights going. I stood up, dazzled by flashbulb pops of color from behind the tight-packed old triple-deckers, strobing to pick out every dent in the alleyway garbage cans. I chucked the book and snaked on my flip-flops. Outside, an ancient Oldsmobile muttered up the hill. It crossed the bright alley's mouth, caught in momentary silhouette. Exhaust blue with oil. Wheel wells rusted to filigree. The fire sucked moisture from the air, tightening the skin along my cheeks. I cut across the tar-soft street and between the wood-frame hulks facing ours. For just a second, coming out the other side, it was like stepping into one of that guy Ouija's photos from a 40s copy of Life. Black and white, some police scanner tragedy back when everyone wore hats and cars were bulbous as the Hindenburg. I blinked, and it was just my neighbors milling slack-jawed, tank tops and stretch shorts bursting with that translucent flesh I always attribute to cool smoke and government cheese. I stepped in among them and chastised myself. No worse snob than a poor relation. Helmeted firemen, sweat-slicked in rubber coats, rushed to yank down equipment. They raised a ladder and we sighed, our eyes fixed on the rooftop flames, the heavy hose arcs of water. We stood mesmerized until the trucks left, then stumbled home with that aftermath smell of bucket-doused campfire caught in our teeth. Insult to injury. How absurd that it should all happen again the next night. The absentee owner may be wanting to squeeze just a little bit more from his insurance. 3 a.m, and there I was, back out on the sofa, reading Capote and looking up in response to the onslaught of crackling noise. For a minute, I thought I should peel myself off the Naugahyde and shake Dean awake, but it was only an hour before his alarm would go off, even on a Sunday. For him, that summer was all dawn to dusk welding and invention, at his family's farm, or with a rail grinder crew in Canada. I should have gone to bed myself, but waited until after they'd put out the second fire. In the quiet that followed, there was the thump of a great storm sweeping in from the west. I knew the air would chill and sweeten in its wake. A crack of streetlight spilled inward when I opened our bedroom door. Dean's long legs were tangled in the top sheet, his summer gilt hair bright against the pillow. I sat on the edge of the mattress, and he stirred half awake, pulling me in close when I stretched out beside him. I'll say again that those fires had nothing to do with the dead girls, but still, those 2 nights are what kicked it all off for me. They were the last time I found sleep without first having to acknowledge, in the hollow dark, at least partial guilt for someone else's murders. Chapter 2. By the time I really woke up the next morning, Dean was long gone. I'd surfaced briefly as he kissed me goodbye, then listened for him to kickstart his Harley. Its potato-potato idle all basso profundo in the pre-dawn quiet. Around 11, I shuffled into the kitchen. I'm an ideal candidate for a caffeine IV, a liter bag of the stuff set to a fast drip and hung off a wheeled chrome dolly so I could drag it around. I settled for a pint glass of blistering strong French market coffee, cut by half with milk and finished with a fistful of sugar. Light, sweet, crude. I sucked it back fast, already late for lunch at my in-laws. Dean was home maybe a week this time. I'd hammered him into promising he'd take the afternoon off. His Canada gigs were brutal. Couple days' notice from this local outfit, Spearomatic, and he'd be off to Moose Country for weeks, the lone scab shoehorned into an otherwise Union crew car. No phones, nothing but endless, blue-treed vastness, and the mind-fracturing screech of grit tearing into steel. If you've ever laid a penny on a track, you know how trains punish metal. They leave a shiny, paper-thin oval of copper, Lincoln's face smeared clean out of existence. Same thing with steel. Trains mash microns of rail forward, like taffy in front of a rolling pin, leaving a series of regular waves behind. Each passing boxcar, hopper, and passenger coach exaggerates that pattern, until finally the track's corrugation gets so pronounced that momentum along its distorted surface starts to batter equipment and burn extra fuel. At that point, you can either replace it or tackle the distorted bits. The second option is, not surprisingly, cheaper. Enter the rail grinder, basically a locomotive fitted with twin rows of spinning abrasive discs. Because track isn't flat on top, the grinding crew had to angle these discs by hand, positioning each to shear a discrete ribbon of corrupted metal from the railhead's convex surface. Even so, existing grinders couldn't quite mimic the original half-teardrop profile. Dean's work meant we could never plan stuff. Not just because there was no telling how long he'd be home, but because he crammed pent-up months of invention into the downtime. On the road, he kept the old grinder up and running. At home, he was hell-bent on designing ways to automate it. He'd programmed a computer to adjust each grinding head from inside the cab. Spearomatic was ready to buy, but Dean thought a different linkage might replicate the railhead's arc. If that worked, they'd get years more use from the same track. But the computer alone meant 2 guys, not 20, could run any grinder in the world. He could sell it to Spearomatic, the Southern Pacific, anyone. The Union, of course, pretty much wanted him dead. Dean didn't care. He was too excited about how this was the ideal opportunity to provide structural integrity for our future. I called it a ticket out of this shithole. Spot the English major. I looked at the stove clock again and hustled toward the bathroom sink, where I slammed a brush through my hair and some paste on my teeth. If you want a visual for me, Madeline Dare, I'm 5'5", but lie and add an inch on my driver's license. When I was 14, old guys in bars started telling me I look like Ingrid Bergman. In daylight, among the sober, I'd pass for her hockey-playing cousin, the one who's just a touch too fond of the cream herring, but still has the cheekbones and the narrow hips. I confided this once to Dean. We were standing against each other, and since he's exactly a foot taller than I am, the top of my head fits perfectly beneath his chin. "Fuck Ingrid," he said, insinuating an arm around my waist and peeking down the front of my sweater. "I vastly prefer a more buxom woman." In that regard, he will never find this marriage a disappointment. I grabbed the tabbouleh I'd made the night before out of the icebox. Well, okay, fridge or whatever. I come from that tribe of verbal conservatives who still say Victrola and tomato. Old High Long Island, my first language. From the broom closet, I took my grandmother's shotgun for a little after-lunch shooting. This was a beautiful object.